Joe Burrow just said something about Shedeur Sanders that should make every single person in the NFL world stop and pay attention. And I'm talking about one of the best quarterbacks in the league, someone who's been to a Super Bowl, someone who knows what elite quarterback play looks like at the highest level, going out of his way to give props to a fifth-round rookie that half the media has been trying to write off since draft night. This isn't some casual comment. This isn't some throwaway line at a press conference. Joe Burrow sat down with reporters and gave specific, detailed praise about Shedeur Sanders that tells you everything you need to know about what's really going on with this kid. And the fact that so many people are ignoring what Burrow said or downplaying it should tell you something about the narrative that certain folks are trying to push. Because let's be real here, when Joe Burrow speaks about quarterback play, you listen. This is a guy who came into the league as the #1 overall pick, with expectations through the roof. This is someone who's dealt with pressure, scrutiny, media cycles, locker room politics, all of it. And when he looks at Shedeur Sanders and says what he said, that's not just respect, that's recognition. That's one elite quarterback looking at another player and seeing something real. Something that goes beyond stats, beyond draft position, beyond all the noise. So what exactly did Joe Burrow say? When reporters asked him about Shedeur Sanders and whether he'd watched him play in college, Burrow didn't dance around it. He didn't give some generic political answer. He said, "Yes, I liked watching him play in college. I thought he did a lot of things. I thought he could throw it. And of course, since his dad is who he is, he knows how to deal with the media and the spotlight." Listen to that carefully. Joe Burrow liked watching Shedeur play. He thought Shedeur made plays consistently. He specifically said that Shedeur can really throw the football well. Those aren't empty compliments. Those are specific observations from someone who understands what it takes to play quarterback at the highest level. But here's where it gets even more important. Joe Burrow then said something that exposes the entire situation Shedeur's been dealing with in Cleveland. He said he's definitely been under the microscope more than anybody. What round did you get picked? 5th round. Certainly more than any other 5th-round pick in the history of football. Let that sink in. Joe Burrow, who was the first overall pick and came into the NFL with massive expectations, is openly admitting that Shedeur Sanders has faced more scrutiny, more criticism, more intense media attention than any 5th-round pick in the history of professional football. Think about what that means. 5th-round picks usually fly under the radar. Nobody's watching them. Nobody's expecting anything from them. They get years to develop without pressure, without cameras on them, every single day. Shedeur Sanders has been treated like a 1st-round pick in terms of attention and pressure, but like a 5th-round pick in terms of opportunity and expectations. He's getting the worst of both worlds, and Joe Burrow sees it. He sees the unfairness of it. He's calling it out in his own diplomatic way. He's saying the quiet part out loud that Shedeur has been under a microscope like no other 5th-round pick ever has been. But he's handling it with incredible maturity and poise. That's not something you say lightly. That's not something you say about just anybody. That's recognition from one franchise quarterback to another about how difficult this situation has been and how well Shedeur has navigated it. Now let's walk through how we got here, because the timeline matters. When the Browns drafted Shedeur Sanders in the 5th round, there was immediate controversy. You had people saying it was a publicity stunt. You had people saying he was only drafted because of his name. You had analysts saying he'd never see the field, that he'd be a clipboard holder at best. From day one, the narrative was set. And then you had Kevin Stefanski, who reportedly didn't even want to draft Shedeur, suddenly in charge of his development. Think about that dynamic. You've got a head coach who allegedly pushed back against taking this kid, and now he's supposed to be the one developing him and giving him opportunities. From what we've seen in training camp footage and preseason, Shedeur showed up ready to compete. Based on the clips that made it out, he was making throws, showing arm talent, demonstrating the kind of processing speed you want from a young quarterback. But the depth chart decisions told a different story. The Browns kept going back to veterans. They kept giving reps to guys who, let's be honest, weren't showing anything that suggested they were the future of the franchise. And every time there was an opportunity for Shedeur to get meaningful snaps, it seemed like something else came up. Another veteran got the nod, another excuse was made. It looks like there was a pattern developing. When you watch how other fifth-round quarterbacks have been handled historically, they usually get a chance in blowout games. They get garbage time reps. They get preseason opportunities to show what they can do. From what we've observed, those opportunities seemed limited for Shedeur compared to what you'd typically expect. And fans started noticing. Browns fans started asking questions. Why isn't this kid getting a shot? Why are we running out the same veterans who clearly aren't the answer? What's really going on here? This isn't about making excuses. This is about context. Two things can be true at the same time. Shedeur Sanders can be a fifth-round pick who needs development, and the situation around him can be less than ideal for that development to happen. You can acknowledge that he's a rookie with things to learn while also recognizing that the environment he's in hasn't exactly been set up for his success. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's just looking at the facts of the situation and asking reasonable questions. And then Joe Burrow's comments come out, and suddenly you're hearing validation from one of the best quarterbacks in the game. Burrow went on to say, "He seems to be handling it well, and every clip I see says most of the right things to the media." That's just who he is. That's what you want from a player. It seems like he's dealing with it in the right way. That's high praise from Joe Burrow. He's saying that Shedeur isn't putting on an act. He isn't pretending to be someone he's not. He's authentic, he's comfortable in his own skin, and he's handling an incredibly difficult situation with maturity. When veteran players see authenticity in a young guy, that matters. Because so many rookies come into the league trying to be something they're not, trying to fit a mold that doesn't match who they really are. Joe Burrow has clearly been paying attention to Shedeur's media appearances and how he carries himself. That tells you something important. Elite quarterbacks watch other quarterbacks. They pay attention to how guys handle pressure, how they talk to the media, how they carry themselves as leaders. And Burrow has been impressed enough with what he's seen from Shedeur to publicly praise him. That's not something that happens casually. That's respect from one quarterback to another. But here's where it gets really interesting. Reporters asked Joe Burrow if he'd talked to Joe Flacco about Shedeur Sanders, since Flacco spent time with Shedeur in Cleveland before moving to Indianapolis and then Cincinnati. Burrow said, "Yeah, you talk about a lot of different players across the league. That's usually how it goes. You get a new guy and you're asking, oh, he was with this guy I was with, or this guy, I wonder what he thought of him." That's sort of how you start talking to new guys in the locker room. Try to find some common ground. So Joe Burrow and Joe Flacco have definitely talked about Shedeur Sanders with each other. Think about what that means. Two accomplished veteran quarterbacks, both of whom have won at the highest levels, have specifically discussed Shedeur. They've talked about his game, his abilities, his potential. When reporters pressed Burrow about those conversations, he smartly said, "I'll keep that between us," meaning he's keeping those locker room discussions private. That's the right answer because those are private conversations between quarterbacks. But the fact that those conversations happened at all tells you that veteran quarterbacks view Shedeur as someone worth discussing and paying attention to. If Flacco thought Shedeur was just an overhyped fifth-round pick who couldn't play, those conversations wouldn't be happening. Flacco clearly saw something real, something worth mentioning to another elite quarterback. Joe Flacco spent significant time with Shedeur Sanders in Cleveland. He saw how Shedeur prepared, how he studied, how he responded to coaching, how he interacted with teammates, and whatever Flacco told Burrow about Shedeur was significant enough that two veteran quarterbacks had detailed discussions about it. That's not nothing. That's recognition from people who know what they're looking at when it comes to quarterback play. And here's what makes Joe Burrow's comments even more powerful. This has been a frustrating season for Burrow personally. The Bengals aren't making the playoffs, despite him putting up MVP caliber numbers and playing at an elite level. When reporters asked him how he felt going into the final game of the season, Burrow was honest. He said, "Obviously disappointing, but you've only got one opportunity to go out and play well and show what you can do." Joe Burrow isn't happy. He's frustrated. This is someone who expects to compete for championships every single year, and instead he's playing in a meaningless final game while other teams prepare for the playoffs. When asked what the Bengals need to do to avoid being in this position again next year, Burrow didn't hold back. He said, "Am I right? Every year we want to be competing for championships. We don't want to be where we are right now. That means something's got to change." Whether that's players that we have continuing to improve and get better, and playing championship caliber football, or bringing guys in, or whatever it may be, obviously something's got to change. Joe Burrow is being real when he says the Bengals need to do something different, because what they're doing now isn't working. But despite being frustrated and dealing with a disappointing season, Burrow still took the time to give thoughtful, detailed praise to Shedeur Sanders. That tells you he thinks Shedeur's game and approach are legitimate. When you're going through a tough season and you still go out of your way to recognize another quarterback's talent and how they're handling a difficult situation, that's genuine respect. When reporters asked Burrow about his role as a franchise quarterback and how he communicates with the organization, his answer revealed exactly what top quarterbacks do behind the scenes. He said, "First and foremost, my job is to play as well as I can. Second, continue to get better. And third, be the bridge between the coaching staff, the front office, and the locker room. Relay feelings that players have. Talk about how you feel in the locker room, because the coaches and front office aren't in there every day and don't know a lot of what's going on." That's what elite quarterbacks do. They serve as the bridge between players, coaches, and management. They communicate what's happening in the locker room. They provide feedback and perspective that front office people might not see. And when you watch Shedeur Sanders handle press conferences and interact with his teammates, you can see he's already thinking that way. He's protecting his teammates. He's not throwing anyone under the bus. He's handling media responsibilities professionally. Even though he's just a fifth-round rookie, he's carrying himself like a franchise quarterback. Joe Burrow recognizes that quality in Shedeur because he does the same thing. The contrast in their situations is striking, though. Joe Burrow was the first overall pick with the entire organization built around him from day one. Shedeur Sanders is a fifth-round pick fighting for respect in an organization where, from what's been reported, the head coach didn't even want to draft him. Yet Shedeur's demonstrating the same professionalism, maturity, and leadership qualities that Joe Burrow shows. That's not easy to do as a rookie, especially when you're not getting the opportunities or support that a first-round pick would receive. During the press conference, one of the more interesting exchanges came when a reporter asked Burrow about his relationship with the Browns, and specifically about Myles Garrett going for the sack record. Burrow showed a lot of respect for Garrett, saying he's more athletic than anyone else on the field, bigger and stronger than everyone else, and has a mentality that keeps him from getting too high or too low, which is pretty rare for a defensive lineman. Burrow said he's gotten to know Garrett a little bit over the years and respects him both as a player and a person. When asked if he might be the quarterback who gives up the record-breaking sack to Garrett, Burrow just laughed and said, "He's got me a lot." A lot. That's how elite athletes show respect for each other across the rivalry. And Burrow is showing that same kind of respect to Shedeur Sanders by recognizing his talent and how he's handling the spotlight. Let's talk about the scrutiny angle, because this is where it gets uncomfortable. Joe Burrow said Shedeur has been under the microscope more than any other fifth-round pick in the history of football. That's not an exaggeration, that's reality. Every move Shedeur makes gets analyzed. Every press conference gets dissected. Every practice rep gets evaluated. His body language on the sideline gets studied. People are watching this kid with an intensity that's usually reserved for top 10 picks, not fifth-rounders. And the expectations are impossible. If he doesn't play, people say he's not good enough. If he does play and has a rookie moment, people say he's overrated. There's no winning. From what we've seen in media coverage, there's been this constant narrative that Shedeur is only getting attention because of his father, that he's only talked about because of Deion Sanders, that his name is carrying him rather than his ability. But here's what that narrative ignores. His father's name doesn't throw the football for him. His father's name doesn't make reads for him. His father's name doesn't handle NFL-level pressure for him. Whatever advantages or disadvantages come with being Deion Sanders' son, when you're on that field, you still have to execute. You still have to perform. And from what Joe Burrow has observed, Shedeur has the ability to do that. The media cycle around Shedeur has been relentless. Every week there's a new story. Every game there's new speculation. Is he going to play? Should he be playing? What does it mean that he's not playing? The constant attention would break a lot of people, especially rookies trying to find their way in the league. But based on what we've seen from Shedeur's public appearances and how he carries himself, he's handling it with remarkable composure. He's not complaining publicly. He's not throwing teammates or coaches under the bus. He's staying ready, staying professional, and staying focused. Joe Burrow recognizes that, and that recognition matters. When one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL goes out of his way to praise a fifth-round rookie's game. And character, people should pay attention. Burrow isn't doing that for publicity. He's not doing that to create headlines. He's doing that because he respects what he's seen from Shedeur and wants to acknowledge it publicly. That's quarterback-to-quarterback respect. Fan reactions to Burrow's comments have been interesting. Browns fans who've been calling for Shedeur to get more opportunities feel validated. They've been saying all season that this kid deserves a real chance. And now, one of the best quarterbacks in the league is essentially agreeing with him. Fans of other teams are starting to pay attention and ask questions. Why isn't Cleveland giving this guy more reps? What's the real story here? The conversation has shifted because when Joe Burrow speaks, people listen. But there's also pushback. There are people who don't want to hear it. People who've invested in the narrative that Shedeur is overhyped, that he doesn't belong, that he's just a product of his father's name. Joe Burrow's comments challenge that narrative directly. It's hard to say a fifth-round quarterback is overhyped when Joe Burrow is specifically praising his ability and how he handles pressure. It's hard to claim someone doesn't belong when veteran quarterbacks are having detailed discussions about his potential. The pushback comes from people who don't want to admit they might have been wrong about Shedeur Sanders. Now let's talk about what Joe Burrow said about dealing with the media and the spotlight. He specifically mentioned that because Shedeur's father is who he is, Shedeur knows how to handle media attention and the spotlight. That's not a criticism. That's an acknowledgement of a skill set that's incredibly valuable in today's NFL. Being able to handle media responsibilities professionally, to say the right things without creating distractions, to protect your teammates and organization while still being authentic, that's not easy. A lot of veteran players struggle with it. The fact that Shedeur is doing it as a rookie in an incredibly difficult situation speaks to his maturity and preparation. Growing up as Deion Sanders' son, Shedeur has been around cameras and media his entire life. He's seen how it works. He's learned how to navigate it. That's not a negative. That's an advantage that helps him handle the pressure of being an NFL quarterback. Joe Burrow recognizes that advantage and sees how Shedeur is using it effectively. That's a smart quarterback evaluation. The authenticity piece that Burrow mentioned is crucial. He said Shedeur is just who he is, and that's what you want from a player. In a league where so many players are carefully managing their image and saying what they think people want to hear, authenticity stands out. When a player is comfortable being themselves, when they're not trying to fit into someone else's mold, that confidence translates to the field. Shedeur isn't pretending to be someone he's not. He's not putting on an act for the cameras. What you see is what you get, and veteran players respect that. Joe Burrow mentioned that in every clip he's seen, Shedeur seems to be handling the pressure well and saying most of the right things to the media. That's not accidental. That means Burrow has been actively paying attention to Shedeur's media appearances and press conferences. He's been watching how this rookie carries himself and handles questions, and he's been impressed enough to mention it publicly. When an elite quarterback is paying that much attention to a fifth-round rookie, it tells you something about how that quarterback views the rookie's potential. The locker room dynamics piece is fascinating when you think about it. Joe Burrow talked about how when new players come to a team, you start asking around about guys they've been with before, trying to find common ground and learn about them. That's standard NFL practice. But the fact that Joe Flacco and Joe Burrow had conversations specifically about Shedeur Sanders tells you something. Flacco saw something in Cleveland that was worth discussing with another elite quarterback. Maybe it was how Shedeur prepared. Maybe it was how he studied film. Maybe it was his arm talent or his processing speed. Whatever it was, Flacco thought it was significant enough to bring up with Burrow. And Burrow clearly values Flacco's opinion enough that those conversations left an impression. When you have two veteran quarterbacks with decades of combined NFL experience discussing a fifth-round rookie, that's meaningful. That's not gossip. That's professional evaluation. That's one quarterback telling another quarterback that this young guy has something real, something worth paying attention to. The frustration Burrow expressed about his own season adds another layer to all of this. Here's a guy who's played at an MVP level and still isn't going to the playoffs. He's frustrated with his organization's decisions. He's calling for changes to be made. He's being honest about the situation not being good enough. And in the middle of all that frustration, he still takes time to give thoughtful, specific praise to Shedeur Sanders. That tells you the praise is genuine. If Burrow was just being political or saying nice things because he had to, he wouldn't have gone into that much detail about Shedeur's game and character. The bridge between players, coaches, and front office that Burrow talked about is such an important role for a quarterback. You have to communicate what's happening in the locker room to people who aren't in there every day. You have to relay feelings and concerns without betraying your teammates' trust. You have to provide perspective that helps the organization make better decisions. That's a delicate balance that requires maturity, intelligence, and leadership. And from what we've observed in Shedeur's public appearances and how he talks about his teammates and organization, he understands that role already. He's protecting people. He's being professional. He's showing leadership qualities that typically take years to develop. The parallel between Burrow's situation and Shedeur's situation is interesting to consider. Burrow is frustrated because he's playing at an elite level, but his team isn't winning due to factors beyond his control. Shedeur is in a situation where, based on what we've seen in limited opportunities, he's shown ability but isn't getting chances due to factors beyond his control. Both are dealing with organizational dysfunction to some degree. Both are handling it with professionalism and maturity. That might be part of why Burrow has so much respect for how Shedeur is navigating his situation. When Burrow said something's got to change for the Bengals, you could hear the frustration in his voice. He's not accepting mediocrity. He's not making excuses. He's saying the current approach isn't working and adjustments need to be made. Whether that's players improving, bringing in new talent, or something else entirely. That's the mindset of a franchise quarterback who expects to compete for championships. And that's the same kind of mindset you see from Shedeur Sanders when he talks about staying ready and wanting opportunities to prove himself. Neither of them are content with the status quo. The respect Joe Burrow showed Myles Garrett in that press conference is the same kind of respect he's showing Shedeur Sanders. He recognizes talent, he recognizes work ethic, he recognizes people who carry themselves the right way. Burrow isn't someone who gives praise lightly or just says nice things because he's supposed to. When he compliments another player's game or character, it's because he genuinely sees something worth acknowledging. That's why his comments about Shedeur carry so much weight. Think about what it means that Burrow specifically said Shedeur can throw it. That's not a generic compliment. That's a specific evaluation of arm talent from someone who understands quarterback play at the highest level. Burrow has faced the best pass rushers in the world. He's made throws in the biggest games. He's seen elite quarterback play up close. When he says Shedeur can throw the football, that's not lip service. That's recognition of legitimate arm talent. The fact that Burrow liked watching Shedeur play in college is also significant. This isn't someone who just heard about Shedeur through media coverage or highlights. Burrow actually watched him play and liked what he saw. He saw the plays Shedeur made, he saw the processing, he saw the decision-making, and he came away impressed. That's informed praise from someone who knows what to look for in quarterback play. The handling of the spotlight and media that Burrow mentioned keeps coming back as a theme. In today's NFL, being able to manage media responsibilities is almost as important as what you do on the field. One bad quote can become a week-long distraction. One poorly handled press conference can create locker room issues. The ability to navigate media attention professionally while staying authentic is a skill that separates franchise quarterbacks from everyone else. And Burrow is seeing that skill in Shedeur Sanders as a rookie. That's rare. That's impressive. That's something that typically takes years to develop. When you look at the totality of what Joe Burrow said about Shedeur Sanders, it's a comprehensive endorsement. He praised Shedeur's arm talent. He praised his ability to make plays. He acknowledged the unprecedented scrutiny Shedeur is facing. He praised how Shedeur is handling that scrutiny. He praised Shedeur's authenticity and media presence. He confirmed that veteran quarterbacks are discussing Shedeur behind the scenes. That's not a casual comment or a throwaway compliment. That's a detailed, thoughtful evaluation from one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And yet, despite all of that, the situation in Cleveland remains what it is. Shedeur isn't getting the opportunities that someone with his talent and approach arguably deserves. The disconnect between what veteran quarterbacks like Burrow and Flacco see in Shedeur and how the Browns organization is handling his development raises questions. Uncomfortable questions. Questions about whether this situation is set up for Shedeur to succeed or whether there are other factors at play. This isn't about conspiracy theories. This isn't about making wild accusations. This is about looking at the facts of the situation and recognizing that things don't quite add up. When one of the best quarterbacks in the league goes out of his way to praise a fifth-round rookie's game and character, when veteran quarterbacks are having conversations about that rookie behind the scenes, when the rookie is handling unprecedented scrutiny with professionalism and maturity, you'd expect that player to get more opportunities. You'd expect the organization to be actively developing him and putting him in positions to show what he can do. From what we've observed, that doesn't seem to be happening to the degree you'd expect. Joe Burrow's comments should shift the conversation around Shedeur Sanders. They should make people reconsider their assumptions. They should make the Browns organization reconsider their approach. Because when a player of Burrow's caliber sees something special in a young quarterback, that's not something to ignore. That's not something to dismiss. That's information that should be taken seriously by everyone involved. The question now is what happens next? Does Shedeur continue to handle this situation with the same professionalism and maturity that Joe Burrow has praised? Does the Browns organization start giving him more opportunities to develop and prove himself? Do veteran quarterbacks around the league continue to recognize his talent and potential? Does the media narrative start to shift based on what people like Burrow are seeing and saying? These are open questions. There are no easy answers. The situation is complicated and uncomfortable and raises more questions than it answers. But what Joe Burrow said matters. His words carry weight. His evaluation means something. And anyone paying attention to what's really going on should be asking themselves why one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL sees something in Shedeur Sanders that others seem determined not to see. What do you think about Joe Burrow's comments about Shedeur Sanders? Does it change how you view Shedeur's talent and potential? Does it raise questions about how Cleveland is handling his development? Leave your thoughts in the comments.